Yeah, I will find a lot of times people think they want food or think they want a certain industry, but my job is to help them understand why. Why do you want this particular industry? Is it because you have a knee-jerk emotional reaction thinking it's going to make you money? And maybe it's not a good fit for you. Maybe your skill set is not a good fit for that. Maybe your capital you're comfortable investing is not a good fit for that.
Right.
And so one of the jokes I make with clients is if we all had $20 million, we would all have a different comfort level of how much to invest.
We are looking forward our way. Hi, my name is Brett Johnson, and with me as usual on every episode is Carol Ventresca. How are you, Carol?
I'm good, Brett. How are you today?
Doing good. We're a little hot in studio today, but it's toward the end of August, and I think the AC is just not catching up with the studio, but that's okay because we've got some really exciting topics coming up in upcoming episodes. But this one is, I think, really special because it's just a different way of looking at changing your life.
Yes, we're looking at transitions, particularly in today's world. And people have a lot of questions of what am I going to do next? This is a great way for us to start.
Right, with franchises.
Yes.
So, and to me, the only person you got to talk to is franchise educator, Talinda Sederi. I've talked with her before. I've worked with her for years. In fact, to kind of give a little background, I met her initially through another podcast that she is now actually a co-host on, the Dollar Saving Divas and More. So it's just one of those, wow, it's such a small world especially when you get into the podcasting realm.
Right. Yes, it is.
So when the Dollar Saving Divas and More needed a new co-host, I told Kelly, you got to talk to Talinda. She did a great job with the interview. You guys get along anyway. It's like, she says, that makes sense. So perfect marriage. So yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about the franchise educator. Talk about your career background, how you got to this point.
Oh, goodness. So I started out moving to New York, getting out of Dodge. And I interned on the Late Show with David Letterman for a while. So it was a lot of fun, learned a lot on, you keep on your toes.
Goodness.
And then I went into sales marketing. I worked at the Sherwin-Williams Company in their marketing department, and I did grand openings all across the country for new stores, relocated stores. And then I worked for ADP in their sales department, cutting my teeth into, just cold calling and sales and meeting with small business owners. And then 2008, 2009 hit, and my husband at the time was laid off. So we got into franchising. Friends of ours that we actually met in Buffalo were from here in Central Ohio, and they owned multiple different types of franchises. So we purchased 2 franchises out of Northeast Ohio. And now 11 years later, I work as a consultant helping people understand, what is franchising? Is it right for them? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And if it is right for them, which ones?
Exactly.
Right.
It seems like when I've talked to clients in the past that they look at franchising as sort of mysterious. And unless you have enough money to buy a McDonald's, there's nothing else out there. So give us a little bit of basic information about franchising. What is it? Why is it different than owning just your own business? And what are the advantages?
Sure. So franchising is a great vehicle to use to get into business ownership and not have to recreate the wheel. So you made an excellent point about the McDonald's and having millions of dollars, because that usually is the first thing people want to know about or think that they need is I need $5 million, I have to do a McDonald's, or I have to do food. And our job is to really help them understand, one, there's sort of this fun little phrase I've learned over the years is that if you've heard of it, it's either ridiculously expensive or the territory is already taken. So there's many other options out there. So everyone wants to understand, what is the orange theory before it hits big?
Yes.
So our firm represents over 300 different concepts from emerging to 400, 500 units. So we have great clips, we have supercuts, and that's about as high up as we go, because then once you're higher than that, then you don't work with a firm because you have so many people within the system that it doesn't matter.
Okay. So in other words, that what you're trying to do is to get individuals to see the advantage of, no, McDonald's is a little up there, but what you're really looking at is, here's a population, here's a territory. I think that's a huge issue.
That is a huge issue. Yeah, I will find a lot of times people think they want food or think they want a certain industry, but my job is to help them understand why. Why do you want this particular industry? Is it because you have a knee-jerk emotional reaction thinking it's going to make you money? And maybe it's not a good fit for you. Maybe your skill set is not a good fit for that. Maybe your capital you're comfortable investing is not a good fit for that.
Right.
And so one of the jokes I make with clients is if we all had $20 million, we would all have a different comfort level of how much to invest. So let's figure out all your search criteria, where you want to be, what you want the business to do for you. What are your goals? How much time do you want to spend in the business? What's your capital to invest? What types of employees do you want to manage? Do you want to manage 70 like at a McDonald's, or do you want to manage 2?
Right.
You know, and taking a look at all these different factors that go into the business ownership and then begin matching you up. So that's our job, is to match you up with different franchisor systems like a business matchmaker. They hire our firm. There's no fees to the client, but they hire our firm to say, okay, let's pre-vet the clients. Let's understand, so that when we make that introduction and that match, the client knows that we've pre-done that research and saved them that time of clicking around on the internet.
Oh, interesting. And so my next question, I think, fits right in here, is that because we don't understand how many different ways there are and different companies there are to franchise. So other than, there are business to business, there's business to customer. What are the industries besides food, which would be difficult?
Food is very difficult. I will first off tell anybody, unless if you've done food before,
right,
I would stay away from it. The other industries, fitness, that's the other big one that people ask about, like about automotive, pets, senior care, health and wellness, so massage, medical is another one that we're starting to get into.
Really? Okay.
Yes. Home improvement, so residential home improvement, you're painting, your flooring, your insulation. Some of that can go over onto the commercial side too. Lawn, mosquito, restoration, that's a huge one.
How bad?
That is a huge one. It's not sexy. It's not very glamorous, but it's a stable industry.
Oh, absolutely.
And so these are some of the things that I try to figure out with the clients is here's all these industries. You may never have pictured yourself in one of them, because a lot of people go with what their passion is. And so what I like to say is, and try to help coach them on, is the idea that if you were going to start a business from the ground up, you would go with something that you know. But franchising allows you to get into industries that you may not necessarily know. But if you know what you're doing with business and managing people, you have a whole new world open up to you.
Well, that leads right into our question about skills. What should you have owned a business before? Is it really a skill-based mindset that I'm good in accounting, I'm good with people and such? I've never owned a business, but I think I can do this. How do you bring that out in the potential franchise owner?
Yeah, no, good question. Understanding their skill sets is key. I would say number one is you need to believe in yourself. You can believe that you can do this. Managing people is probably the second. If you know how to manage people, motivate them, coach them, then owning a business is something that is going to come much easier to you. Having that dedication to the business too, the self-discipline. I mean, whether you're owning your own business or whether you're owning a franchise, having that self-discipline with it, you just can't sit back on your laurels and think, oh, everything's going to come to me for customers. I mean, you have to put into the work. So managing people, believing in yourself, and the self-discipline, are some of the top three. Other skill sets, sure. If you've owned a business before, you're going to know more of what you're getting into. Franchising obviously provides the support and the structure and the processes and systems that are going to give a lot more security and structure than if you were to start something on your own.
Often people would hear when they were job hunting, someone would say, well, you have this hobby. Why don't you make a business out of it? And they would sort of look at me with this blank look like, why would I want to do that? And I'm not really sure I would want to do that. But doing a franchise as opposed to doing just your hobby at a higher level really is giving you a much firmer basis to start a business. And no, it may not be your passion, but it really is identifying the value you bring if you were working for an employer. So now that value you're bringing to working for yourself. Good.
I'm
That's
tired
wonderful.
of making money for someone else is what I hear all the time.
Right.
If you have career background and managing people, and you're at a point now where you want to make more money for yourself than someone else, this is a great opportunity. And you're saying about the hobbies, I kind of giggled a little bit because it makes me think of the book, The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Mm-hmm.
He goes through the whole story about the woman who loved to bake the pies, but then it became her burden.
Right.
The entire thing was her burden. She didn't enjoy her hobby anymore. And I've kind of done the same thing. I love photography. I sort of started a little side photography job thing. But if I were to really turn it into a full business, it would be about managing the business. I wouldn't get to do much of the creative side anymore. And I feel like it would ruin the hobby for me.
Right. And I think artists in general have that issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's they can't create if they have to make money.
Right.
Off of that creation. It sort of interferes with that, that process.
It's two separate sides. And most people cannot marry the two successfully.
Mm-hmm.
So we owned a painting business. My former husband and I owned a painting business in Northeast Ohio. And, working with the painters, they were great at their job. They understood painting. They had the creative side. They wanted it done well, but they didn't get the business side of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was, marrying those two thoughts. So that's one of the things I try to help people understand. You don't put on your business hat, not your consumer hat.
Oh, good point.
Right. So think of the business. Maybe it's not something you would use, but is there enough of a market out there? Is there enough of a percentage of the market in your area that is using that service?
And that's completely eye-opening to some people that they never think about that's what businesses are doing. I think their mindset is they got into it. They own the business because they liked that product. They liked that food. Which you read about that with restaurateurs all the time. They started the restaurant because they like that type of food, and they have a knack to doing it. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what they should be doing.
Correct.
And that's why restaurants go out of business. So, the attrition rate's nuts. That industry. That because you like making breakfast doesn't mean you need to go up against First Watch.
Very true.
That is an excellent point.
Well, and it really, in some ways, whenever I would hear somebody say to a job seeker, oh, just, take your hobby and start a business, I'd almost kind of think of it as a little bit flippant to that individual who is truly in need of work.
Right.
And starting a business is so overwhelming in general, but to do it when you are at a critical spot, needing to work, needing to pay bills, it was sort of like, I don't know, I don't want to say a nasty comment, but it was ignoring the issue, ignoring the real issue. And part of that issue was likely the person didn't know what value they brought to an employer. I'm always going back to that. And individuals don't really understand how much they can do for an employer transitioning from one place to another. And that's what they're doing with franchising, is transitioning from working for somebody else to working for themselves. They're still bringing all that value with them.
Sure.
True. And your comment made me think of something too. I think the respect for what it takes to open a business.
Right.
Yes. And I think one thing that I try to get through to clients, shifting your perspective or your paradigm and how you're viewing it is one thing. But also understanding that for as much as sometimes a franchise can feel like a plug and play, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Right.
It's not just purchase the franchise and sit back.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I mean, there still needs to be a respect and a regard for business ownership and what it takes. And, some business concepts are set up as semi-absentee and some are owner-operator. And these are some of the things we go through with the clients to understand. But there's still work involved. Now, building the wheel, inventing the wheel of starting your own thing is different than going into a proven system.
Mm-hmm.
So you have that support, but it does still take work and the respect for understanding what it takes to manage, start it, run it.
So the most obvious question to you, of course, is what are the hottest franchises to own?
The question I get
it's not
all
McDonald's.
The time. Well, and the secondary question to that is, how do I own a Chick-fil-A?
There you go.
Right. I would say apply to Harvard Business School first. You might get in. The hottest businesses. Yeah, that question gets asked around a lot. We do a lot of talks internally at our firm about that one. It kind of depends on, what we're seeing coming up in the ranks based upon the business itself, the market that it's hitting, who structured the business, how they're operating it. Sometimes you get people who just want to start a franchise and that's it. Sometimes you have franchise veterans and executives who know what they're doing and they've started something from the ground up, or they found a business that was already in operation and have taken it on and now structuring it as a franchise. So one of the things that I try to have people look at is it may be newer, but what's the history here?
Right.
Who's starting it? Why are they doing this? And how are they doing this?
My first thought when I asked that question, what's the hottest to own? I'm guessing that people who are asking you that question are really saying, where can I make the most money? Which is not necessarily hottest.
No. No. I mean, I think we naturally attribute hottest to richest. But I mean, the other thing to think about there is hottest doesn't mean it's going to make you money.
Right.
There are McDonald's franchisees who fail, and you want to look and say how. I mean, it's the most proven system. If you don't believe in it, or you're going to sit back and not do the work, you're sure going to fail. If you don't follow their processes and systems, you're going to fail at anything, even a McDonald's franchise.
And I would think if you'd been looking at a McDonald's, you might want to go into one for a while over a series of months. And
between their process,
right.
You're going to have to be dedicated just to get through the process.
And kind of take a look at who's behind the counter. If you see new faces all the time, there lies in the problem. Maybe that's why it does fail, because it's hard to find people.
It is.
Depending on, again, the franchise and such, is one of those, that's a piece of failure, is that you can't keep good people.
Well, and that was one of the things that's sort of been rolling around in my head. Just because it is a hot place or it's a successful franchise doesn't mean that you're going to find people who want to work there. We often used to get franchise owners calling us saying, I can't find enough people to work for me. And looking at if they have multiple locations of a particular franchise, then just get rid of one so that they have enough people to work at the other stores. So it's not easy. Because
that problem is endemic with privately owned businesses as well.
Oh, sure.
The owners all of a sudden now, especially through the pandemic, looking at, okay, I got to do different duties now. I have to go back and sell. I have to go back doing something that I did when I started the business, taking on new roles. You got to be flexible.
Right.
And that's not just that's with any business that's owned, whether it's franchise or not.
Well,
that's that mindset. Okay, this is going to be the tough question, but not really, but I'm sure it's a question that always comes up. The financial implications, of course, and again, I know that varies on every franchise has a different price point and such, but there are other nuances to the financial piece too of health and the marketing and such. So kind of go over that in general when you walk into it. Okay, this is the price point, but there are other pieces to owning a franchise that you have to take into consideration too.
Sure. Well, first, I usually like to point out that if you're clicking around on the internet, it's going to give you the lure of a national name brand logo. And you can own it for, and they'll list some low figure, and that's usually just the franchise fee. So in franchising, there's the whole overall project cost or overall investment, or item 7 in the FDD. And that is your full project cost. So what happens is they lure you in with that initial piece, but the FDD is going to show you the franchise fee, the grand opening marketing, the training, working capital, everything that it takes to get into that business. So what we look at is they have a certain required net worth that they want franchisees or potential franchisees to have, and a minimum liquid, meaning non-borrowed funds.
Wow.
So there is a threshold to begin with. And so that's another thing that we use to help match people up. And money's always a funny thing. And I tell people, I'm not trying to dive into all your finances, but we need to talk some high level here, because money's very private. It's very personal. But if we are going to start looking at business here, we need to take a look at some of these thoughts. And you have to, be careful and be respectful, because someone's working really hard. They're trying to save. Maybe then we can lay out a plan that 6 months from now or 12 months from now, at least then they have a goal and they know where they need to be if this is something they want to get into. Other people, they need to understand that there are finance options. So if you have the matching net worth and liquid, then we can look at SBA loans are an option. There's SBA Express, there's the SBA Traditional, and then there's rollovers, which a lot of people don't know about. And I'm going to be very careful here and not get into it too much, because I leave this to the experts, but enough to kind of whet the appetite here is, if you are no longer at your current position Your 401k is invested into the stocks at that company, but you can roll it over to invest into yourself, and it's penalty-free and tax-free.
Oh, good. Okay.
And a lot of people are not aware of that. So that's usually an eye-opening piece of information, that they have a resource here where they don't have to go into all debt, or maybe partial. Maybe they do partial rollover and partial SBA. But that's where then I hand it off to the experts. We have national firms that we recommend, and they have, relationships with all types of different lenders. So there is a difference between the national lenders and local banks, because the national lenders are more familiar with franchising.
Let me also add on another question to that. When you're looking at funding opportunities, does it make a difference if you are a female-owned business or minority-owned business? Are there additional places to look for funding?
There can be. Traditionally, the SBA route is the route that people are going to go, and that's just very standard as to any applicant.
Okay.
So we've got them interested. They're listening to the podcast. What's the next step? What's the process of working with you?
Okay.
Let's just say it's that quote unquote, as you call it, the dating, that first step of, I love that analogy.
Oh my gosh. Well, because I think for one, I'll answer your question in just a minute, but for one, you're getting into a serious conversation, business. This is your next step. This is a big decision, another chapter of your life. So, let's lighten it up a little bit. So investigating a franchise can be very attuned to dating. And I think this helps lighten the mood, add a little laughter to it. It's like casually dating. Just because you decide that you want to look into franchising doesn't mean you now get the pick of the litter and say, okay, well, I don't know if I want to buy you yet. You have to be awarded a franchise. And that's where we come in and help people and understand that, you have to go through a process with me to vet you, to then be introduced to the franchisor, because then they have processes and procedures to go through an investigation with you for two different reasons, really. One, they want to see how well do you go through an investigation that's very process oriented, because it's going to give them a second level layer of information on how well you went through that. And usually will give them an indication on how you will behave as a franchisee. But then also there's so much information to learn. That, whether it's how do I hire somebody? How do I fire? How are you going to get me customers? My marketing, my SEO, my training, all these questions that people have. They give it to you in all these different formats of an investigation, of phone calls and webinars and validation, that you can process and digest this information so that you're not hit at once trying to, learn all of this and think about it and marinate on it. So the best way to think about it is casually dating. Let's match you up. Everyone can begin casually having conversations. I usually tell people, don't investigate more than 2 or 3, because it can be a part-time job. It can be, I do tell people, plan on dedicating at least 5 hours a week to the phone calls to the 2 or 3 franchisors, to listening to any webinars, any other sort of homework that they have. And then it's just casually dating. And then through that filtering process, one will fall off, maybe another. You'll start to get more serious with one franchisor. Maybe you're going to meet the parents, and I'm putting that in air quotes, because then it becomes they're going to, discovery day or meet the team day. Now things are more serious. We're talking more, wrapping up the financing, wrapping up any sort of franchise attorney. And then are you offered a franchise? Are they going to propose to you? And then you do have a decision to say yes or no. And then if you say yes, then we move forward and you get franchise married, which still is not as stressful as regular marriage, because this is only 10 years usually. And then you can decide how many franchise babies you want to have. And
you've thought this really through, haven't you?
At least laughing about it a little bit. And, you can do 1 baby. And with anything that's your first thing, your first kid, your first business, your first house, that first real decision, you will always have the, oh my gosh, what did we do?
Right.
Those 2 a.m. feedings, oh my gosh, and you're sitting there rocking with the baby. You still know in your heart it was the right decision, but it's going to be normal to feel like, oh my goodness.
Saying that it's dating, that is an interesting perspective, because I really thought of buying a franchise as buying a house. So it really was. It was my decision. As long as I had the money and I got there on time and I could sign that contract, it was mine. That's not it. That's a Very insightful. Very insightful.
And then I also tell people after you have the first franchise baby, you can have a second one. You can scale the business. And then by the second one or third one, now whether you're looking at a second territory or a second unit, depending on brick and mortar or service, you're throwing Cheerios at the franchise unit because, with the second, third kid, you know what you're doing. So it's economies of scale. You've already bought the crib. You've already bought the stroller. You've already bought the car seat. And I could sit here for another hour and list everything that Babies R Us tries to tell you need. And, at that point, so then you already have purchased all this stuff or hired some of these people, it's just now economies of scale that why don't you get another unit or another territory? Because, it's just going to bring in more revenue at that point.
Right.
Do folks normally, if they add on to the franchise, normally stay with one company, or do they look at different franchise?
Both.
Really?
I've had both. I've had some people that come in and they do 2 units to start with, and then they come back and they purchase more. If it's available in the area, and this is, some things we go through on during the investigation. And then sometimes what other people will do is think of synergistic businesses. If you own a painting company, why don't you own a flooring company?
Right.
Or
a restoration company.
Or a restoration company, and you own a painting
then
company.
You own the process almost.
Well,
or you can think of it differently of 2 totally different industries. You can own a restoration company and a trampoline park. Why not make it fun? Why not make it different? And then you have less seasonality.
I was just going to say that.
There's options there. Yeah.
With the notion, it's like buying stock. You don't buy only one.
It.
Exactly. And hopefully insulate yourself from a catastrophe of having 10 McDonald's and they're all closed because of a pandemic kind of thing.
Right. Exactly. So, excellent point.
And that was, I was going to also ask when you were talking about webinars for training, and have you seen changes because of the pandemic in terms of the way people are approaching getting the information? Not that they are or are not looking at a franchise, but in terms of the process of going through?
The biggest change in the process really only comes at the end when you would have that meet the team or meet the parents day. Typically, you would fly out to the franchise headquarters. They're doing that as a Zoom call now until everything gets better.
Well, good.
But yeah, we get a lot of essential business requests. It's not very fun or sexy types of industries, but they are consistent.
So what would be in that group?
In that essential business? Restoration would be number one.
Okay.
That mold, water, restoration, remediation type of businesses. Insurance-based, you're not chasing customers for the money. There's national insurance relationships set up with the franchisor. That's another big,
Oh my gosh, right.
Try to set that up on your own.
Yeah. When I've seen those trucks go by, I always think that's solid.
Is it right?
Again, you're right though. It's not sexy, but it's like, wow.
So that's something that I ask clients is, what's more important to you? End result or subject matter? You got to pick one. And there's no judgment, but what's important to you? Maybe someone wouldn't be happy doing a restoration franchise. It just isn't going to sit well with them. I mean, you have to, it doesn't have to be your passion, your hobby, something that you're going to start from a business ground up, but you do have to enjoy it a little bit. There has to be some element of it you're going to enjoy.
If you're not interested in it, you're really not going to be a good franchise owner.
Well, right.
You don't want to be dreading the day every day. Then you might as well be working for someone if that's the case.
And that's the case. But don't confuse interest with hobby. Don't confuse a business industry that you could be interested in and owning and seeing the full benefits versus something that you're passionate about and that you want to do one day. And, and I tell people too, if you have an interest in this business and you can see yourself running it, maybe it can help fund your hobby.
Very true.
Yeah.
Right.
So that really goes into my next question is, when do you tell somebody you really don't want to purchase a franchise? What are the things that you hear of individuals that you're pretty sure this isn't going to work?
When they're really not following the process with me from the beginning, when they're asking questions about royalties, do I really have to pay these royalties? What's the value of the royalties? And they're sounding already disgruntled about it. Well, why couldn't I just do that on my own? All those sorts of comments that start leaking out in conversations with people, that's usually, a red flag that, it's not going to be for you, and that's okay. So our firm's founder wrote a book, The Franchise MBA, And that's a great resource. I do give the book for free once someone starts working with me. I do give the book for free. I mail it out to them. There is the IFA, International Franchise Association. They're a great resource. My website, thefranchiseeducator.com, I have a resource section on there, and I have a bunch of links that will go to different sites from there. Our firm has virtual trade shows. So you can, quote, go to the virtual booth and visit that franchisor. And we're having them twice a month. And the schedule is listed on my website.
Well, that leads also to a question I had, too, and that's going to lead to the very end of our podcast here, too, is besides reading me, what else can they do before contacting you? Or is it just kind of a fool's errand because they're not going to ask the right questions anyway? It's maybe more of just contact you. It's going to be the best first step to do that.
I think you really need to ask yourself, how ready are you? I will tell people, if you are curious about franchising, read up on it. Maybe read the book, The Franchise MBA. Okay. Really figure out what's motivating you. Why do you want to do this? Are you mad at your boss for the day? If you do that and you go click around on the internet and you start entering in your information, you've just now opened Pandora's box, and everyone in the world has now purchased your information, and you're going to be called and emailed, and you're going to be so frustrated, you're going to throw your hands and say, oh my gosh, and you're probably not mad at your boss 3 days later. If you really, truly have been considering this business ownership through franchising, calling me would be one of the best first steps, because then we can really lay out, what's the game plan? Why are you doing this? Here's the real steps. You had asked me a question earlier about what would be next. So, when I begin working with clients, we have an initial call just to kind of get a general feel. And then we go through a series of phone calls so that I can build a business plan for them, using this as the filter to match up against, all those skill sets and the capital and the geography on where they want to be. And we use that as the filter. So then I can then present to them and say, okay, here's all of the concepts that matched up with you. Now, they may not be the right one for you. You may not think, one or two are good, but they match up with you. So let's give them a chance. Pick your 2 or 3 you want to begin speaking with and dating, and then you'll start going through the process. And the process and investigation can take, anywhere from 4 weeks to 8 weeks, 10 weeks, kind of depending on schedules. And so the beginning to end, working with me to usually signing a franchise agreement, should you be awarded and accept, anywhere from 3 months to 6 months.
That's actually quick.
I wish it. Yeah,
to me, in my mind, I always thought it was a longer process. Than
right.
That. Yeah. The way, especially when you set this up at the beginning of the podcast, wow, that sounds like it could take a long time, but that's a lot quicker.
Well, right, but that's just to get to the franchise agreement. Right. Now to get the business open.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, right.
That's a different story.
And even before that period of the 3 to 6 months, hopefully they've done some work in terms of really making sure this is what they want to do, as opposed to coming home one night and saying, I'm not working for that person anymore. And so one of the questions that I meant to ask earlier, and I'm going to throw it in here, even though it's not in line. Oftentimes, young folks want to immediately open their own business. I used to hear a lot of young people say, oh, I want to start this nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I would always sort of cringe and go, they don't have enough experience. And, the reports always say people 50 and over have more success at owning their own business, starting something new. So without looking like I'm disparaging young folks, what exactly would you look at in terms of somebody coming to you as to their background? If it's a young person or an older person, is there something in there that tells them they're going to be successful? What they've done in the past, what their interests lie, whatever that may be.
To answer your question, it's going to again come back down to that self-discipline. What is motivating you? You can have, a very successful 35-year-old person who has more self-discipline than some 60-year-olds I've seen. Age, it really doesn't matter. I think age comes into it more from the standpoint, typically it means someone has a higher net worth to be able to financially be looking into some franchise concepts, and usually some of the experience. But then again, that comes down to the person. There are some entrepreneurs that started businesses at 25, and at 35 or 40, they know, they want to open something else up. And I've had some serial entrepreneur conversations that, they're like, I love franchising. I don't want to go through the pain and the hassle and the headache and the blood, sweat, and tears and start something from the ground up. So I think just going back to that self-discipline, a good self-awareness of who you are, how you would be as a business owner, some of the real reality checks that it takes to get a business off the ground.
Right.
So for our listeners, Talinda has a great quiz segment on the website. Quick quiz to understand where you are in your search and possibly which concepts would fit with you. I think that's a great quiz to take before contacting you. So go to the website, take the quiz. She gets the answers, kind of sees what's going on. But I think it's a nice self-assessment as that beginning stage. It's right there on the website, thefranchiseeducator.com. And take the quiz and see what's going on. I think it's a really nice, logical, soft step into this, along with everything else we talked about in this podcast, and see if this is the right place to go. But to me, knowing Talinda as long as I have, she's a great resource, great first step. If you're thinking about this, she's not going to force you into anything, and she will tell you this isn't the fit for you.
No,
it doesn't benefit you to do that.
No, and I've been in my client's shoes, and that's one of the biggest benefits. Is I was on the other side of the phone call before. I don't like to feel pressured. I don't like anyone to not be transparent and real. And I will tell clients, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. And, I may not always tell you what you want to hear, but I want you to understand that if you're going to make a decision of no, that's okay. But do you know why you're making that decision? And you can walk away and be comfortable with it. And I don't want you to be thinking that you have to be forced to say yes and then regret it. So, let's figure this out and ask the tough questions and challenge you on this. And is that okay?
Right. I mean, your ultimate goal is for them to be successful.
Right. And franchisors do not want unsuccessful franchisees. It's not a win-win for either side.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, true, it comes down to money. Let's all be real here. But at the end of the day, a franchisor does not want an unsuccessful franchisee on their books. They have to disclose that. So they are going to do everything that they can to make sure that you're successful. Now, whether that's holding your hand a little longer or sending in some support or having you go through training again. And I think people get a real fear. Once they start reading that FDD or that franchise agreement, I'll get a phone call. Oh my gosh, if I step left too far, then they're going to get rid of me. And it's like, well, no. What they're really doing is they're protecting the system. So I tell people, and this was advice given to me years ago, read those FDDs or read the franchise agreements from the perspective of you're already in the system. You spent some of your hard-earned savings to get into this system. Now, how are you going to feel if the guy over on the next territory next to you isn't following it? He's doing his own thing. So you want that franchisor to be able to, I guess, essentially get him in line. You all bought into this same system. You believe in it, you're following it, and now that's what they need to do. They're not going to look for every excuse to get rid of you, but it really comes down to those exceptions of, okay, now we really need to do something to make sure the system does not collapse.
As a condominium owner, I always tell everyone, this person's pink flamingo is someone else's artwork. And you really do want to stay with the system or else you're going to have a problem.
Right.
It's
and some people don't like that. They get a very knee-jerk negative reaction, and that's okay.
Well, thanks for being a part of the podcast.
Thank
we
you.
appreciate it.
I appreciate
it was wonderful.
It. Yes.
Great.
I know this topic is always on the forefront of some going into business. Like you said, it could be that knee-jerk reaction. I had a bad day at work. Now I start to look, but I think unfolding a lot of the pieces to this, the mystery around owning a franchise, I think it's important because it's really a great legitimate way to self-sustain yourself and build a new life. Honestly.
Oh, right. And there may be different reasons why people are coming to me. It could be career transition. It could be building plan B because they're looking ahead in 5 years and do they still want to be in this job? They could be knowing that layoffs are coming. Maybe it's the stay-at-home mom where her kids are now in high school and she wants to contribute, but she wants more control of her schedule. So there's really different reasons. There's some people want to do a master territory and add it to their financial portfolio. So many different reasons why, but all of them can fit.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
What's the best way to contact you? I know the website, of course.
The website's the easiest. There's my email on there and the 800 number, thefranchiseeducator.com.
Great. Good. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.